Constitutional lawyer Ndegwa Njiru is our guest this morning. How we welcome him is by giving him the day's proverb.
Okay.
That's your cue. That's your cue, City.
That's my cue. Just take a deep breath. It is the destiny of the donkey to carry a heavy load.
Is the destiny of a donkey?
Is it? Okay.
It is the destiny
Of the
of
donkey.
the donkey to carry a heavy load.
Yes. You see, one of the questions that would be asked in this day and age in Kenya, is it the donkey's passion? Does the donkey have a passion for carrying
For this.
for a heavy load?
Yes. If it doesn't, shauri yake.
Well, it appears so.
That's the donkey's showry.
That is the donkey's showry, as you correctly put it.
It's a donkey's portion. Muzigo muzito.
Sehemu yake.
Yeah, ndio hiyo. Ndegwa Njiru.
You know, this proverb is very interesting because we have always had a saying that punda amechoka in this country.
Yes.
So I don't know whether this load that CT speaks about and this proverb, perhaps, where does this proverb come from? Is it Kenya, Nigeria?
It's Angolan.
Angolan, right? Yeah. So it looks like in that state of punda amechoka tena. And in this country, there are so many things that zinachokesha punda. Although the destiny of the punda seems to be having a predetermined destiny. Some of these destinies that the punda is suffering is because of failure to make the concrete and precise choices. That is why punda anachokesha na hizi mizigo sana.
Punda alienda kwa the wrong house.
Even when you want to give a route that might want to liberate this donkey from this load, you'll still find the donkey milling around the same road. It doesn't want to go far away from the load. Yes.
It just wants to be there.
That's the destiny of the punda.
Hey.
I don't know what
There you go.
City's view.
You've come in bullish this morning.
So at times you might not even want to sympathize with this punda because
Like,
the punda does not even want to make the choice of the load that it wants to carry.
Can it make a choice, really?
It depends on the whether we are talking about the 21st century punda or the 20th century punda. Yes.
or the biblical punda.
Or the biblical punda.
Okay.
You know, punda is a very interesting animal. Sometimes I hear from them that preach
From
to
the
us.
punda?
No, from them that preach to us.
Okay.
That there was a certain man who was going to destroy the people of God.
Yes.
And this guy was so blind that he could not even see God. The only person who saved this man was a punda.
The only person.
So it looks to even be having
that
some...
was called Balaam.
Yes. Balaam, sometimes it looks like even this punda can have some spiritual inspirations. So it may be necessary then to listen to it sometimes.
Punda.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ndegwa,
Yes.
were you in Kamukunji yesterday?
I wasn't in Kamukunji.
You've come in here this morning carrying the Constitution.
Yes.
I don't know you're carrying. Hey.
I was not in Kamukunji physically, but I was in Kamukunji spiritually and mentally. Yes.
Why?
Because Kamukunji belongs to them that believes in the process of change. Kamukunji belongs to them that believes in the process of reforms. Kamukunji is historical in the sense that whoever wants to see the light as the donkey did might then have to revisit Kamukunji. It has always been the moral compass and the political compass for this country. And so it is not amazing that there are some people who do not appreciate it. And the only thing that they can do is to issue threats that thou shalt not make an attempt to go to Kamukunji. The Kamukunji is historical, and there are them that have never stepped their foot in that particular field. When you go to Kamukunji, you get baptism by fire. That is why Nkrumah was saying, seek ye thee the political kingdom first. If you want to seek the political kingdom through the process of reforms, through the process of social change, political change, and economic change, it's Kamukunji.
So why were people in Kamukunji yesterday?
We were in Kamukunji because we wanted to retrace ourselves. We wanted to do a self-introspection. We wanted to redirect ourselves as to where we want to be. We wanted to remind ourselves where we have come from and also do some audit whether we have actually achieved that which we have always aimed to achieve. You know, Kamukunji is where the whole process of reform was consummated. And upon that consummation, we have always been having some stillbirth. Sometimes we have the baby has refused to be born. You know, we wanted to redirect ourselves by going to Kamukunji. We wanted to take from the well of wisdom and the fountain of knowledge and the fountain of reforms.
What reform do you want now?
There are so many reforms that this country needs. And one of the reforms that we need is to restructure and redirect our thinking. Because if we do not emancipate ourselves and view and visualize the kind of the country that we have or we want to have, then all the proposed changes in this constitution that have come with this morning will never be realized.
I hear you, and I hear the words that you're speaking,
Yes.
Ndegwa, but I have to ask, so what are we talking about here? So, okay, come to Kamkunji to do an audit of what has happened over time.
Yes.
Come to Kamkunji to then get back on course. So then what was realized at the end of the day? So what then have you said? Beyond what we hear of, we're
Yes.
rejecting the administration and all of this. What then has come about? And that question of reforms, what are we saying?
You see, the question of the pronouncement of we do not recognize this regime, of course, it has got some reasoning behind it. Whether the regime that we are saying we do not recognize was yielded by the process that we all contemplated in the Constitution. To the extent that then you realize that the process was not duly followed, then the conclusion is that any regime that comes into place or any office that is established outside the confinement of this constitution, then you have no reason to recognize it.
But surely.
So, yes? Yes, because if you look at Article 3 is very clear that we will not form government. And may I just read it so that we can...
Please read it.
We can have we can have some kind of... it says...
It's Article 3 of the Constitution
Every person has an obligation to respect, uphold, and define the Constitution. Any attempt to establish government otherwise than in accordance with this Constitution is unlawful.
Okay.
Any attempt
to do what?
to establish government
Okay.
other than contemplated... other than the process is contemplated in this constitution is unlawful. One of the process contemplated in this constitution is that government shall be established through the process of a free, fair, verifiable, accurate, transparent, and accountable election.
And what's the threshold for that? Free, fair, verifiable,
you see,
transparent.
Visible, yes.
we have always had a problem for that. Even the Supreme Court itself has not been able to establish the parameters for what do you look at when you want to evaluate whether the process is accurate, is verifiable. If you remember in 2017, when Chief Justice Maraga and the court nullified the elections,
Yeah.
so the test for that nullification was whether the election followed the process. So the court said that we are not just looking at the numbers here. We're also looking at the process that yielded those numbers. So the question as to what amounts to the parameters that I've just mentioned is very fluid. And this Supreme Court, in this case for 2022, the Supreme Court shied away from giving us a direction. So,
But if direction had been given previously,
Yes.
or you're saying the direction which was given previously was unclear.
you see, it depends on case-to-case basis. At that particular time, the issues that were being questioned was the process. In this Supreme Court case, 2022, we were questioning the process and we were questioning the numbers.
Okay.
But you can see,
And you went to court with your grounds for
we went to
questioning
court, of course.
the process
Yes.
and the numbers.
Yes.
Let's first of all agree that by going to court, you were exercising your right within the
That's
Constitution.
correct.
Right?
Yes.
And the Constitution recognizes that particular court, not the magistracy,
Yes.
not a high court,
Yes,
not
the Supreme
the
Court.
Environment
That's
and Land
correct.
Court, but the Supreme Court
That's correct.
as the only place
Yes.
where you take such a dispute.
That's correct.
Okay? Now you went there before the court with boxes, truckload of
Exactly.
information
Yes.
to show the court why the process and the numbers are questionable.
Exactly.
Haya, tuende from there.
Now you see, when we went to that court, Latif, we had the honest belief that the court will rise up to the occasion and be an impartial court. But we realized that we are looking at a court that was part and parcel of the extension of the regime that they were seeking to establish.
At what point did you realize this?
Even during the proceedings.
And what was
and it came out very clearly.
Well, no. I mean, what you're saying, I hear, but you see, you are an officer of the court.
Yes.
Okay? This process that you people represent and which you champion, for it to make sense to us lay people, a statement such as the one you've made must be supported by fact.
Yes, I will.
So, continue.
You see, when you go to a court, you expect to find a very neutral arbiter. An arbiter that will not single out one party, focus on that particular party, isolate that party, and make that party the object of the proceedings. What happened in the Supreme Court, and we all heard it, is that the Chief Justice was out to indicate and to show to the whole and sundry, like the people who went before her seeking justice were wrong, and they made the wrong choice. Why? Because of the choice of the words that were used during the delivery of that judgment. You know, this was a hot air, this was a wild goose chase, even going to an extent, city, of singling out advocates appearing before them and castigating them. You see, what the court was telling us is, you guys should not have come here in the first instance. You guys, don't you ever come here again. What that judgment did, and most importantly, the language of the delivery of that judgment did, is to tell Kenyans that whenever you have an issue like that one again, don't approach us. Look for other means and ways to sort out your political troubles.
Ndegwa,
And the good thing is
it the first time that a judicial officer has used strong words against parties appearing before them?
No, it's not the first time.
Looking at, this is what you've brought before me,
It's not the first time.
and this is how
It's not the first time, but the choice of words from a judge tells it all. You see, when we enacted the new constitution, and Kenyans must remember this, we created an organ that was called Judges and Magistrates Vetting Boards.
yes.
It was chaired by Justice Chad Rao. One of the grounds that a judge could have been disqualified to hold the office of a judge was the question of temperaments. There are so many judges who lost their positions as judges because the committee evaluated their temperaments from their judgments. And they realized that the temperaments of this particular individual does not befit a person to hold the office of a judge.
Okay.
So if it was necessary to evaluate the temperaments of a judge, then why then should we come? And of course, the reason why we were doing that sit and Latif is we wanted to reform the judiciary. We wanted to have sober men and women sitting at the bench, knowing that temperament will not form part and parcel of the judgment that you're going to deliver. You will not look at me as Ndegwa Njiru. I am a Kikuyu. I support Azimio. I do not support Azimio. I look at you and single out, and then becomes emotional. A judge is supposed to divorce himself from the case. What we witnessed in the Supreme Court is that the judges were in the case.
So you base that on the judgment that was delivered by the court.
Yes.
And the wordings of the judgment that was delivered by the
and
court.
the language.
And the language.
Yes.
Not on what they said with regards to the evidence that you produced before.
You see the
court.
language that they adopted and the conduct of these judges
The argument
biased them from detailing.
By the time you're getting to the use of the word, this was a wild goose chase.
Yes.
This was hot air. It was after a build-up.
Exactly.
Evidence presented.
What you must understand.
Evidence subjected.
What you
to
must
scrutiny.
understand.
Evidence examined. Questions asked.
Yes.
Cross-examination
That's a
happened.
perfect question.
It was then established
Yes.
that, for example, you brought in an affidavit. This affidavit, before we even got to the end of the hearings, you had amended your own affidavit once, twice, thrice. And some of this was appearing perjurious. And the judges say, when an advocate, and in this particular, let's use, when Ndegwa Njiru, who has gone through court, who has come here before a chief justice and been admitted to the bar, and is a member of the bar.
Yes.
goes ahead and advises their client to put on record information that is false, that lawyer ought to be questioned.
Well, you see what happens in a court processes. Just like they would walk into a doctor's chamber, the doctor will even watch at you, look at you from a distance and realize Latif is limping. So even before he puts you under the microscope and the test tubes processes for diagnosis, he has already realized that you are limping. He has formed an opinion that Latif City could be having a problem with one of his limb. The same does happen to the court. That even when during the presentation of the case, the judges forms an opinion from the presentation alone. And that's why you keep on saying that the demeanor of an individual will matter a lot. So you do not have to wait to the conclusion and to the delivery of the judgment to detect a judge who is being biased. And that is why sometimes in court, we ask judges to disqualify themselves, to recuse themselves from the conduct, and that is from the conduct in which they're exhibiting themselves. Unfortunately, you cannot ask the Supreme Court in a case such as this one to recuse itself.
So you spent the last about 10 minutes or so discussing the verdict of the Supreme Court.
Yes.
Is that what you were discussing in Kamukunji?
No.
Because yesterday in Kamukunji, you talked about you don't recognize this government because the process of election was illegitimate.
It formed the part and parcel of our debate. And it is still forming the part and parcel of the struggle to reform this country and to get this country to the right course. Why? Because the Supreme Court is an apex court in this country. It must be able to breathe confidence to the people. Whether we lose the case or we win the case, I need to go out of that court feeling that justice has been served. That although I have lost, there was proper evaluation of the evidence, there was proper evaluation of the facts, and I have lost this case genuinely.
Wakili, I hear you saying that all of this is...
And you should have given me some mint.
Okay, don't worry.
Right.
I hear you saying that this is all of this is composite.
Yes.
To say that what then came out of the Supreme Court took these things into consideration. The electoral process.
Yes.
The manner in which the judges delivered the ruling. And then also looking at whether those who went through the process were satisfied.
Yes.
Judicially or otherwise.
Yes.
So I hear you saying this is it is composite in nature, it's taking everything into consideration.
Yes, it's an evaluation, yes.
Understood.
Yes.
Now, what, and I think this is the thing, what would have been satisfactory, even if the result was the same? What would have been satisfactory?
Remember what invited the Kamukunji aspect is the dossier. The dossier came from the servers that we had made an application for them to be allowed access.
Okay.
You see, if the Supreme Court was careful in the manner in which it handled this case and ordered for the access, unrestricted access of those servers, then we would not be where we are today. Because those facts would have been laid before the court, and the court would have had an opportunity to evaluate the veracity of the truthfulness or lack of it of those facts. But to the extent
what server? Hold on. What was happening at what's that building? The IBC office called?
Yes, they gave us
Anniversary Town.
Anniversary Town.
They gave restricted server.
And even restricted access to the server.
Restricted access.
And why was it restricted? Did you ask that in court?
There was a letter from the semantic or something.
Smartmatic.
Yes.
Smartmatic.
That company, which said that because of the security nature of the content of the documents that they were holding, they cannot give unrestricted access.
Yeah.
We now had to get somebody.
This access that was granted.
Yes.
Did it show you this is how the information was getting into this server, and this is how the information was getting out of the server?
It never gave the clear aspects of what we were looking at.
So essentially,
they compacted the servers.
Do I hear you to be saying that they gave you access to what served their purpose?
Absolutely.
That's what you're saying.
That's
the
what you're
case.
saying.
And we made out this case before the Supreme Court.
And what does the
And
Supreme
the
Court have to say?
Supreme Court did not give a clear directions as to whether we should have unrestricted
You know,
or restricted.
there's a question that Ndu has asked.
Yes.
It's pertinent, I believe. Huh? So I am going to belabor the point. What could the Chief Justice have said? How could she have worded? Conclusion same. This election, forget about. I mean, this thing, it was okay as far as we are concerned. What could she have said? How could she have phrased this thing so that you, as a learned friend, would have felt, okay, I don't agree with the end result of this.
But I'm going to accept
But
it.
it's been presented in a way that I can at least, accommodate.
You see, when the Chief Justice came to deliver the unanimous decision of the Supreme Court, they avoided giving us a precise analysis of the facts as to the case that had been presented. They instead went further to just punch holes to the Azimio's case. You see, anybody who walked out of that case, that court, we all said, okay, that's the decision of the court. We respect it, but we don't agree with it. And that's what has culminated into these processes of saying we now do not recognize this government.
They gave the full judgment
Yes.
later.
Yes, and I've read it.
You've read it.
Yes.
Are you saying that in that full judgment they have not given you reasons
that
why
judgment is
they
not one
disagreed
that
with
can,
them?
that judgment is not one that can be relied upon by other jurisdictions.
Okay.
And you know,
So
Supreme
in a
Court,
case where you as a lawyer, you look at what has come out of the court and you disagree,
Yes.
what do you do?
I'm supposed to go for appeal, but unfortunately, this is the apex court.
Okay.
You can't appeal.
Okay.
I don't have any other place to go to take my grievances.
Okay. So what do you do?
I go to Kamukunji
And do what?
and tell the people that, you see, guys, we
Because
believed.
I disagree,
We
I
know.
will not recognize.
We tell the people we believed in a process of a free, fair election and accountable one. We subjected ourselves to that process. At the conclusion of that process, the results that were declared, we did not agree with them. So we moved on to the next level where our contestation can be heard. We went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court behaved in this and this manner. Now, are you telling me, Latif, that in the event where all the institutions that you believed in could resolve the problem have failed to resolve that problem and have just compounded that problem, that Kenyans are left helpless?
Okay. Let me ask you. The Supreme Court is a creation of the Constitution.
Correct.
And you've said Article 3(2) of the Constitution
Yes.
is any attempt to establish a government otherwise than in compliance with this Constitution is unlawful.
Is unlawful.
Article 3(1) of
Yes.
the Constitution, every person has an obligation to respect, uphold, and defend this Constitution.
Absolutely.
Respecting, upholding, and defending the Constitution,
Yes.
does it stray far away from accepting and respecting decisions of institutions created by this Constitution?
You see, that provision is it will depend on how you want to interpret.
Oh,
that
we can
Constitution.
now read this one. We cannot read this one in isolation.
If you read this
Let's
Constitution,
take a break. You'll come. When it comes to that one, we have to read with others.
yes.
But the one of forming a government,
You just read it
we
alone.
just read it alone. 27 minutes to
I
8.
didn't say that.
This is Kenya's biggest conversation. Constitutional lawyer Ndegwa Njiru is here with us in the studio. He's Azimio Damu. He was not in Kamukunji physically, but he was there in spirit
Yes.
and in
Mentally.
everything.
Yes.
Mentally. And he's telling us the implication of that, what was declared in Kamukunji yesterday, refusal to accept the legitimacy of the government of the Republic of Kenya.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Eric Latif Nduo Kositi Muga, and our guests, the lawyer Ndegwa Njiru, who is breathing fire the same way. The headline that says Raila was breathing fire.
It breathes fire. But Ruto, unshaken.
So Ndegwa, let's not go back into belaboring the point
Yes,
of,
yes.
we went to court, we
Supreme
agreed.
Court.
Let's okay.
We go to Kamukunji.
The latest thing now is you met in Kamukunji yesterday.
Yes.
And the leadership of Azimio said, we don't recognize the legitimacy of this government or any officers that have been appointed and
That's
put in
correct.
office by this government. What does that mean? And then what?
It means that, therefore, to the extent that the Kenya Kwanza government is in office, they are holding that office unlawfully and illegally. Their legitimacy has seriously been put into question by the revelation that they actually never won the election.
There's a revelation.
Yes, of course, from the IBC whistleblower. Watu wa kupiga firimbi.
Okay, let's look at this because obviously you are a legal expert.
Yes.
So tell us.
But not only is he a legal expert, he's partisan. Yes,
please hear my question.
He's an Azimio.
No, please hear my question.
Yes.
Something of this nature has been revealed.
Yes.
That on the server there is particular information.
Alleged.
What is the process of the verification of this information? Public process, what would be that somebody can then say, okay, this information has been found. How do we legitimize this information that we can then know that it is truth against which many things can be held?
Yes.
How would you do that? Now, if for a minute, take your bias and set it aside.
Yes.
Looking at it from a legal point of view, when such information comes out into the public sphere, what are you meant to do with it? Through the process of verification, what must happen first? Because it could be me. It could be me saying that some guy sat with me. We were sat in a coffee shop somewhere and somebody told me, well, here's a server. Have a look at it. How can I verify it?
You see that the tragedy we have in this country is that we have a policy that you alleged must prove. And that is a policy. But unfortunately, there are some instances where you allege the existence of a particular fact, but you're not the person who is in control of that information.
Yes.
As it is in this case for IBC. You see, IBC, then the burden, when we allege that there was voters rigging and the elections were not properly declared, then the burden shifts to IBC. Because they are the ones who have who are mandated constitutionally to provide and to guard that process. Now, when we suspect or when information comes out that there was Raila Amolo Odinga won the election, the burden shifts to the IBC to countermand that process.
Which IBC, for which the chairman, for example, just the other day has said, thank you very much, goodbye Kenyans.
Yes.
For which there are 4 who are under the microscope right now, sitting at tribunal as we speak.
You see.
But countermand what? The IBC conducted the election.
Yes.
The IBC counted the votes, tallied the votes, declared a winner, and publicly announced and gazetted the result of the election.
Yes.
You want them to countermand something that has been said by an unknown human being.
You see now, this unknown human being has brought something to the public. He has indicated that you guys are being ruled or governed by an illegitimate government, a government that did not garner the required threshold to govern us. Now, to that extent, IBC has the burden of telling us, no, whatever is being told by this whistleblower is hot air. Whatever is being told by this whistleblower is wild goose chase. Now, if they do not do this,
if Marjan,
IBC,
the CEO
Marjan
of IBC is still in office, if Marjan released a statement today and said any allegation out there is hot air.
Yes.
No, let's not even use the words hot air because now you'll start using the word hot air against him.
Yes.
Any allegation against there is untrue.
Yes.
And unfounded.
Yes.
Would you be okay?
We cannot be okay. You know why? Because these are individuals whom we are saying that they gave us an illegitimate and illicit child. But the DNA has proved otherwise.
You know, there's something that I think we're trying to say here, and trying to follow your thought and trying to follow the understanding of Azimio.
And not just Azimio, Kenyans.
Okay.
Azimio. Because
Azimio
it is
Kenyans.
Azimio who have brought this thing to the fore.
Yes.
And it is them who are talking
But
about it.
yesterday when we went to Kamukunji,
Yes.
we never issued invitation cards to any Azimio supporter. There were people of all walks and faults in Kamukunji.
I'm not disputing that.
So these are Kenyan cause. It's not an Azimio cause.
Bwana Njiru, who is it who is speaking about the whistleblower? Is it not Azimio?
Is a Kenyan, is a concerned Kenyan. He has not defined himself.
Who?
That Kenyan
No.
is a Kenyan who feels he has the fidelity to the process.
I don't have an issue with that. I am simply saying the matter we are discussing
Is a Kenyan matter.
has been brought to the fore by Azimio. It is them who have brought it to the fore.
No.
Bwana Kioni was here. Mheshimiwa
Yes,
Kioni was
yes.
here. He's an Azimio person, if I may say so.
Yes.
He touched on it.
He's a Kenyan.
Raila Odinga was the Azimio presidential candidate.
But a
He has
Kenyan.
spoken of it. But brother,
Okay, we can proceed on that presumption.
we are all Kenyans here.
Yes.
Even Du is a Kenyan.
Yes.
Okay?
Hey.
Yes. We allow for dual citizenship. She's a Kenyan by marriage.
We can proceed on that premises.
So I am saying this. I'm not discounting what you're saying.
Yes.
I'm simply saying that everything I'm hearing so far does not have any weight of evidence that I would consider convincing beyond what I'm hearing being said. That's really what I'm saying. I hear what is being said, I hear it being repeated, but where's the evidence? Somebody has said, okay, they have said so.
Do you know the whistleblower? Ndegwa?
A whistleblower is a protected person.
All right. Do you know the whistleblower?
Is protected person.
Have you interrogated what the whistleblower is saying?
I have looked at the dossier, and we are still analyzing that dossier.
Oh, you have not yet conclusively
And
analyzed
you
this
had
dossier.
our leader saying yesterday that the dossier does just not entail the presidential results. It also entails other parliamentary and the governorship and all those other results.
Okay. But
Yes.
you have not conclusively looked at that dossier and said, yes, we actually.
No, to the limp that applies to the presidential candidate. What we are telling Kenyans is true. Gospel
see-
true. Anybody with other counter information should also wait for consideration.
But actually,
If-
So
Bwana Njiru,
if there was a whistleblower
Yes.
today who came out today and said William Ruto actually got 11 million votes.
Yes. Then he will be.
So
he
his
will be
legitimacy will be restored.
He will be legitimatizing our claim that yes, we might have established government in a manner that is not prescribed by this constitution.
okay. You know,
Latif.
everything that you have said supports a perspective and a view that Azimio has expressed
Yes.
since the time
Yes.
when the Supreme Court announced the results of the election
Yes.
in the manner that
Yes.
they did.
Yes.
Okay? Now, I am simply saying that in addition to what we have heard and what was said at the rally, if this document or this dossier is still being studied, then let us say it is still being studied and the evidence
For the other electoral
will,
positions.
even for what you are saying
Yes.
as an irregularity,
Yes.
the evidence will be provided at a later date. Because right now, as I listen, there are claims.
Their claims. But just remember, Mr. William Ruto, before the release of this dossier, went public and said that is somebody who wanted to kill and to mutilate the life of the chairperson of the IBC. You see, to that extent, then you might want to ask yourself, even at that particular time when the chairperson of the IBC was declaring these elections, one, did he declare elections in favor of William Ruto, who had pledged to protect him? Because his life had been threatened, and he felt that the persons who were threatening him is the side of Raila Odinga, and therefore I cannot declare him because my life will be at stake. You see, to that extent, it tells you that even the chair of the Electoral Commission was not in full control of his faculties at the particular time that he was declaring these elections.
You have entered a realm
Remember-
that you actually do not have expertise in.
No,
You
no,
cannot
no,
talk
no, no,
about
no.
the mental state of this particular
Absolutely.
person. You
That's why I said he may not have been.
So he may have
Remember, he had
he may have
alleged.
misread what is written.
He-
He may have
remember-
looked at a 5
Remember, he had
and read
alleged.
it at a 7.
Remember, he had alleged coercion. He had alleged duress. He had alleged undue influence. But he has not come out to tell us whether he was the undue influence was only one-sided.
point well made.
Okay.
It could also have been that there was also undue influence from the other side to declare.
Okay.
Again,
So to that extent,
Okay.
then it put the legitimacy of the results to question.
If somebody comes and says, I have gone to Nakuru,
Yes.
must they also say, but I was not going to Naivasha?
You see the electoral commission. You see the electoral commission, Latif. It must be like Caesar's wife. Beyond reproach. There should not be any suspicion that
this is
either you went to Naivasha or you did not pass through Naivasha on your way to Nakuru. To the extent that we are thinking that you even diverted on the frolic of your own and went to Maimahiu. Then your route to Nakuru must be put into question.
You went to Nakuru via Narok.
Yes, or you can go to Nakuru via Narok. You see, they will say the end justifies the means.
You know, Wakili, even as we have this conversation,
Yes.
we cannot run away from the reality that 7 or so odd million people in Kenya voted in a particular direction and then were obviously dissatisfied with the result.
Yes.
So when sentiments like this are expressed very loudly, we can't run away that a sliver of hope then comes back into the hearts and minds of the people
Yes.
who voted in a certain way.
Yes.
Now, the destruction or the damage that we do to those 7 million people or those who may have supported another way
Yes.
is to give them some kind of hope that may not be there.
Yes.
It cannot be that these things are being expressed on a whim. It cannot be that they're being expressed
There are consequences.
on emotion.
Yes. There are dire
Because then what
consequences.
happens to these people who invest everything about them towards this process?
Yes.
And then the question is, so then you say that according to how the feeling is from the Azimio side, that there's no recognition of the presidency as it is. So what?
What will happen is that, one, if I may answer with the last, begin by answering the last question, is that the Constitution has given us a very, very clear path on how to resolve such kind of quagmires and stalemates. One, the Constitution has said that people will exercise their sovereignty either directly or indirectly. Directly is where you have a set-up system. Indirectly is where you have a set-up system of elected leaders. If you have doubts in those leaders, then you exercise it directly. But don't you also forget that this Constitution has recognized international instruments. One of the international instruments that recognized under this Constitution is the ICCPR, International Conventions on Civil and Political Rights. It has recognized the UDHR, Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It has recognized the African Charter on Peoples and Human Rights and all those conventions under Article 2. One of those conventions, or those conventions I've mentioned, they recognize the right of the people to self-determination. It recognizes the right of the individuals to self-determination. When you see a convention,
What does that mean?
you know,
A
people
right
to
to
decide
self-determination.
the form and the manner in which they want to be governed,
Okay.
right?
So create their own government.
It is not defined, but they have to recognize.
Does it
It
include-
recognizes that rights.
Does it include
And by
create
the
your
way,
own government?
even the preamble to this constitution, and I may read the preamble to this constitution, it began by doing one very fundamental issue. Exercising our sovereign and inalienable right to determine the form of governance of our country and having participated in fully or in the process of making this constitution.
Yes.
So the preamble itself has given Kenyans the ability to recognize the form of the governance which they so choose.
Yes.
And they are saying that this government must be formed in accordance with this constitution.
Yes.
And there cannot be a government formed without a free, fair, transparent, accountable, and equitable elections.
We
Okay.
agree.
To the extent that those fundamental principles have then been waived,
Yep.
mutilated, and infringed and violated, then Kenyans must look at the constitution.
But
And?
Do we remain within the full?
So and do what?
Let me. I'm
And-
not finished.
and?
You may not answer that question. You may not ask me that question if you listen to my last part of my submission.
Please go on.
It may answer that question that you're about to ask.
Okay.
You see, if you look into the constitution and you don't find the answer
Yep.
to the issue that is ailing the country, it calls for a conversation.
Okay.
It calls for a review of our thinking,
Okay.
a review of our political inclinations, and it invites the people to think. That is when then people have to think and make decisions, some of those political decisions that are outside the constitution.
Like?
For example,
Such as?
Kamkunji.
in 2007, When we could not use the 1963 constitution to answer the challenges that we had, we went outside the constitution. By doing what? By forming the GRAD coalition. By doing what? By forming the National Accord, by formulating the National Accord Act. We had to do that political maneuver to have political convenience for the purposes of preserving the state.
But remember, we had to come back to the constitution
Yes.
and legitimize that process
We had to
by
legitimize it.
amending the constitution.
Yes.
So whatever else we did out there by shaking hands in the presence of Kofi Annan
Yes.
and Kikwete could only become effective
After the amendment.
after the amendment of the
Yes.
constitution.
Yes.
So it was not unconstitutional.
It was, you remember?
Okay, so now at present, now
Yes.
here we are presently, right? A section of the country says we don't recognize the government that's in place.
Yes.
So what next? That's take us
It
through
means
that. Uh-huh.
that people will have to stop chest thumping.
Who is people?
Those who claim to be in government
And those who claim not to recognize the
and
government.
those who claim not to recognize the government.
Okay.
So chest stamping should
We
cease
must
from-
all
from
stop
both
the
sides.
chest thumping and ask ourselves, what kind of a nation do we want to have? And you know, part of this reason, part of this civil strife that is now arising is because of how people have treated the others. You see, Mr. William Ruto and Mr. Gachagua, they have decided to compact and to push on this country. You see, this constitution does not recognize any aspect of opposition.
No, it doesn't.
The constitution speaks about the majority and the minority. And those guys are all in government. And they have one singular role of oversighting government. But what Mr. William Ruto has done, and what Mr. Gachagua has done, they have decided to look at those guys who are in minority as the opposition. You see, when you look at these guys who are in minority as opposition, you have now said that kuna watu wa upinzani na kuna wale watu ambao wako kwenye serikali. And that is why we abolished that form of government, because we realized that it creates much more division than unity. And that is why in Article 134...
But I stop you there, Ndegwa, because we only have about 4 minutes.
Yes.
Tell us what next.
What
So
next
Raila
is-
does not recognize Ruto
Yes.
as the president, does not recognize this government is in office.
And-
Okay, so now
and this is
next.
not Raila. This is the people who voted for him. They wanted their votes to
Well,
count.
we do not know whether Raila has gone back to ask them. So let's just
Yes.
say
And
Raila
we are
has
now-
openly said he
Yes.
does not recognize.
Yes.
And there are those like you who agree with him.
And-
So let's
and-
go with you and Raila and Kalonzo and Professor Makau Mutua.
And Martha.
And Martha Karua. Those who have said they don't recognize the government.
Fine.
Then what?
You see, that preposition yesterday was endorsed by the Kamukunji people.
Okay, then what?
We will go for validation processes, whether we should continue with the struggle, and that's why on Tuesday, on Sunday we are going to Jacaranda for people to.
What are you
give-
seeking ultimately?
We are
A new election? And what do you want?
You know,
what's your goal?
the
Is
course
it,
shall be defined as we move.
So you
But
don't know?
As at now,
But
we
how
want
do
to
you
tell
start a
Kenyans.
journey without determining what the destination should be? Really, Bwana Njiru.
You
Hata
see,
wewe, surely.
I have told you one very clear thing, City,
Yes.
that as at now, we are validating, or we shall continue to validate our positions. Whether or not we should continue with the struggle for reforming this country. Whether we should continue the process of pushing the implementation of this constitution. These meetings that will be happening will be a validation process of whether the 10 thematic issues that were raised yesterday should form the basis of our struggle.
Let me ask you, do you think Raila Odinga, leader of Azimio, Martha Karua, Kalonzo Musyoka, and the other leadership should go to the people with proper leadership and guidance? This is the direction we should take.
You know when people if you look at someone like Fidel Castro, and you remember the war at the pigs, you remember that
Bay of Pigs.
the Bay of Pigs. At that particular time, the war was very unstructured, but they progressively structured themselves as they moved. They started to recognize who is a general, who is a colonel, who is a brigadier, and who are the foot soldiers. Sometimes when you go to war, you may not have a clear definition, and it will form as we move on. But as at now, we have 10 thematic issues we are raising.
Okay.
And the struggle is premised on those 10 thematic areas.
Okay.
Yes. So what we are saying is, let those who are in power maintain peace, security, and tranquility.
But there's nobody in power, according to you.
No, I'm saying those people, I have not mentioned anyone.
So if you don't recognize them, how do you expect them to, these non-recognizable individuals, to suddenly then have power, which you don't recognize?
You see,
and then you want them to maintain something which they cannot, because according to you, you don't recognize them.
I was challenging you that you may ask me that question. That's why I made the statement deliberately.
Okay, our
you
time
see,
is up. Ndegwa, as always, it's a very short time when you have you in the studio.
There's a question I wanted to ask.